Welcome to Spoilers Intended, a podcast about series, novels, and films. For this episode, the show may be a jewel, but don't let the company fool, or your expectation of League may fuel a descent most cruel into addictive and toxic rule. That's right, we're talking Arcane. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I'm Stephen Ford, joined as always by Andrew Knuckles.
Hello there.
And Joel Killingsworth.
Hello.
You know, in retrospect, we could just do that once and just put it in.
Just copy it every
I know,
time.
but like as it goes on, Andrew's is morphing into mine, and I don't like it because he comes first, and it sounds like I'm changing.
You have to perpetually keep running away, pushing the
Hello?
envelope.
Hello?
Well, so I'm going to try and change it every episode just to like make it just, and then you just give me the look every time, and I'm just like,
Well, I like how I deliberately avoided looking at Joel and then looking at Andrew, looking at Joel. I was like, I know what expression Joel is making based on how Andrew is currently. I can't look at either of you.
This is what happens when you've podcasted with each other for a long time, and then also have known each other for a long time.
Yes.
Yeah.
The true descent into madness.
Yeah.
But before we begin a true descent into madness that is Arcane, we're going to talk a little. We haven't done this in a little while, so we thought it was about time we circle back to it and throw out a little bit of watch list, maybe talk a little bit about what we're all kind of watching right now that isn't necessarily related to research for the show, because, oh my goodness, it has taken over my media consumption.
I mean, you already didn't really watch a lot of stuff.
It has taken over my media consumption.
100%.
110%. I am beyond my normal capacity. Anyways, so I'm going to toss this over to Andrew.
Okay, cool. I basically watched the most stuff out of all of us.
True.
So I've been, during my work day, I have been rewatching all the seasons of 24. If you're unfamiliar, it's basically a Jack Bauer spy thriller yelling right. Damn it for basically 9 seasons. And it's kind of one of those shows where, it's got a special place in my heart. It's not the best show, but it still has its fun moments and everything like that. So that's been fun. I'm on season 4, I think, right now, and still fun. Then my wife and I, we've been watching The Expanse season 6, which has just been phenomenal, despite being a relatively shorter season than what they're normally used to doing, which is like 10-ish episodes. Mm-hmm. And this is only, unfortunately, 6 episodes. So by the time you hear this, if you listen to it on day 1, it will just be 2 more days until the final episode is out, which is sad because The Expanse is just, it's my baby.
Joel?
Well, I also have been consumed with watching things for the show.
Yes.
And so my wife and I have recently finished up Wheel of Time, which we're going to be reviewing on the show. And we are now trying to catch up with The Expanse. We hadn't finished the final episodes of season 5. So we've got 1 episode left there, and then we'll be starting to watch the new stuff after that.
So Andrew, it's worth it.
It's absolutely worth it. This is definitely, The Expanse is just such a good adaptation of the books. Mm-hmm. And they add so much more in there where you get a lot more for other characters like Kamina Drummer, mm-hmm.
she's
such a small character in the books.
She is, but she also like they kind of combined a couple three characters ish.
So Drummer is not much talked about, but she's also kind of a linchpin, mm-hmm. where what she does has big ramifications. So expanding the role makes sense.
Yeah, and just it's honestly, all the seasons have been really good, but these past 2 seasons have just been so much fun. Mm-hmm. And they really kind of, I think they finally figured out the formula. Unfortunately, it's going to end, hypothetically. There's still technically 3 other books that they could adapt from something that hopefully maybe another series or another movie series or something. Yeah. But, hopefully something happens for it. But if not, I'm still very satisfied with how it's going.
So Joel, anything beyond The Expanse?
Not at the moment. There's my to read list is not getting smaller; it's getting larger.
Yes,
and so trying to get back on top of that is difficult.
Okay, well, so I have started to reread the Master and Commander series because I really just have so much time in my life to stuff 21 or 22 extra books into my media consumption schedule, let me tell you. But beyond that, because as Andrew has alluded to, I don't watch a whole lot outside of it. Something that's way off base maybe for this discussion, but a YouTube channel that I've recently fallen into, it's called Half as Interesting. And if you ever want an insight as to why Stephen knows lots of really random things, this is a whole series of maybe 4 to 7 minute videos where he just picks some really off base topic. So one of them was talking about the tallest tower in London that was technically a classified secret. So you could not technically list its address, despite it being the tallest building in the city of London. But it was secret. Don't look at it.
Don't look up.
Right. Or stuff like,
was it like an SAS?
No, it was a microwave receiver transmitter. So it was part of Britain's solution to the potential of nuclear war during the Cold War. So they had cable lines established throughout the country to run news. And if a nuke hit, somewhere else and it cut that line, that's it. There's no transmission. So the microwave transmitters were supposed to be a solution as like another throughput, but also a backup.
Yeah.
So technically what it did was classified, despite it having a rotating restaurant at the top. Like, this is a big building.
We're meeting
We're
meeting at the secret building.
Yeah, don't talk
about it.
And stuff like that. And he goes, it's just all kinds of wild stuff. The smallest international border and what that constitutes. How do you define it? And he goes down into all these to where you get down to like
Monte Carlo?
No, actually. So, he gets into do you talk like the circumference? He's like, it's really not interesting to talk about the largest international border because it's U.S. Canada. Cool, we're done. All right, moving on. But do you go into like the actual border all the way around the country, or is it one? So he gets technically all the way down into it to where it is a Spanish holding in Morocco.
Okay,
that's just a small spit of land that they have a fort on that they refuse to cede to Morocco because they have other holdings within Morocco left over from colonial periods, and if they cede one, they feel like they have
to cede everything.
Cede everything. So it's like a 200-foot wide border, a tiny spit of land. They just have some soldiers on. They have to resupply by helicopter, and they just hold on to it out of spite. So it's just really fascinating tidbits like that.
So that there's two things. One, that last bit reminds me of Sealand. If you're familiar with the World War II era concrete structure, which is technically a fort that a guy basically took over in the 1960s as a pirate radio station. And then he kind of actually turned it into his own country with diplomatic things. And it's been taken over a couple times by other pirates. And then he's taken it back. Now his son controls it. It's such a weird thing. They have their own currency. They have their own passport. Like,
there are so many little things like that out in the world that you wouldn't really run.
No.
There's no way that a school classroom setting would ever have a chance to cover even the tiniest bit of it. You have to go look for it yourself.
Yeah,
but it's out there.
Well, and so like the reason I learned about that was, and this is just another plug for a very large podcast called 99% Invisible. They kind of do the same thing that Steven's channel kind of does, where
it's not my channel,
not your channel, but the channel that you have been watching.
I would love for it to be my channel. It's a really cool channel, but anyway.
But they pick like really like weird things, and they just kind of break them down.
Yeah.
So like one of the episodes they did everything about sand, which you don't think
coarse,
sand is
rough,
it gets everywhere.
Yeah.
There's the Star Wars reference for the episode.
You're welcome. Get in early.
But like basically the whole episode kind of divulged into we're actually running out of sand, and because we're building so much concrete. And it was just a really interesting breakdown of like how much sand we're actually using, and it's actually not a renewable resource at this point because of how much we're consuming.
Yeah,
this sounds like a problem that you can figure out the solution to in Minecraft.
Yes,
you can. Yeah, it's funny. There's another on the same Half as Interesting channel where they talked about the idea that the bananas we eat today aren't the same as the bananas that everyone ate in the 60s.
Okay,
I don't know if you actually knew that or not.
No, I mean I don't eat bananas.
So the bananas we eat currently are basically a clone. It's basically just a cutting of a cutting of a cutting of a cutting of a cutting.
Yeah.
And every, like 99% of the banana plantations in the world grow this type of banana. I can't remember what it was. And the reason is because it was resistant to a fungus, which killed all of the other banana, which had been the most popular banana.
It's weird how that works.
Well, now there is a new fungus that has emerged
that's killing all the bananas.
So at some point, they're going to swap to a different type of banana. And he went so far down the rabbit hole that he actually found one of the few plantations that still grow the older, I think it's Cavendish banana. Cavendish might be the current, the Monte Carlo or something like that was the old one. He found a plantation that still grows that and like bought a box of bananas for like $150 to get it shipped to him to try them. He's like, they are sweeter. They totally did not ruin my stomach, let me assure you, but they are sweeter. Anyways.
Yeah.
Enough of that. Enough of this silliness. On to the actual show.
I think that's pretty interesting.
No, I actually like it. It's half as interesting.
That's
good marketing.
And that's on YouTube?
Yeah. Oh, Joel's making notes. I've made an impression. No, just kidding. Anyway.
He's just picking them up so he can make his bad description of Arcane.
Yes, that's right. So we are into Arcane, and it is that time of the show for Joel to rack his brain and render us a synopsis of Arcane.
Okay, so this is something that is done off the cuff, and we have agreed that I'm doing it, but I always forget that I'm doing it, and so I haven't prepared.
His face is always the best whenever it comes up.
It's like, oh, I have to do this. Okay. So Arcane is a show about it's about the political machinations between two cities that are actually one city across a river. That the very opening scene is you see the result of the last revolt. Mm-hmm. Of one side that's kind of being oppressed, repressed, suppressed. It's not like direct military oppression in most cases, but they are definitely a lower class environment without being given the opportunity to better their situation, their life. And so you have kind of a underworld gangster sort of almost resistance sort of feeling to the characters in the situation in what they call the Undercity. And then in the rich part of town, you have an aspiring scientist who's attempting to crack open the secrets of how do you access magic through science.
Right.
And so we kind of have these two worlds colliding, and the different machinations that are happening in both locales and how they interweave and overlap. And it's really kind of a small scale story focusing in on just a handful of characters that has impacts not only on their lives with dramatic things happening across several years' time, and ultimately dramatic effects on the world at large.
Right. It's a very intimate story at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It really is. I like when you're talking about the two cities, like, oh yeah, it's like sister cities, and they talk about sisters.
Well, there's a lot of duality.
Yes.
In just every theme from like top to bottom for Arcane,
all over the place. So, Joel, you want to give our composite score?
So we absolutely loved this and gave it a 9.5.
So that is the highest rating to date.
Yep.
On the show,
even higher than Spiderverse.
Just pipped it. Just pipped it.
So. It was an absolutely phenomenal execution on a well-written story, taken to extreme heights by a production company that is known for its games, but is apparently a lot better at making shows and music.
No, hold on. League is actually a very fun game, assuming that you have a lot of knowledge of how to play it and how not to interact with the other players that you're playing with.
No, League is objectively a very successful enterprise.
Oh yeah.
So there's not really room to ding Riot Games on that product.
It's just a super
directly.
Toxic community.
Well, that was always kind of the joke, right? Because it was Riot Games, but for the longest time they had one game.
Yeah.
They have branched out very recently.
Yeah, because they have like Wild Rift and some other tactics game.
The TFT, Teamfight Tactics, and then Valorant is also
there.
Mm-hmm.
So they have branched out, and in the process, they decided to also make an anime or animated show. I should really say. We wanted them to make an anime for a long time. They have phenomenal hype videos and cinematic pieces all over YouTube
for like their Worlds tournament that that happens every year, or just new character champion videos and all this other kind of stuff.
To kick off a new season, they always have a new video.
And these are things that I really enjoy consuming, not being a player and not really being familiar with any of the characters. It's just that the quality of the hype that they produce is so high.
So the fun thing about League is, so my wife and I, we used to play, and then we just kind of got out of it because it was not a very fun environment to play in. But we still watch Worlds every year. We still enjoy all the media that they come out with, as far as like music videos and and it's just always a good time. They have a very good baseline of quality that they just kind of always deliver. And but this was just so far and above anything that I would have ever expected out of a show that they would make.
Yeah. To echo into some of the commentary on the show versus the game, there is a proposed change within the game where they are just default turning off all chat, so you can't talk to the other players on the team, on the enemy team. And the meme has been, but that's not where the toxicity is. The toxicity is your own team. You need to just turn off every chat.
Every chat, so you can only ping.
Yeah. And even that can be used. It's kind of the Rocket League thing. Oh, what a save, what a save, what a save. You can do the same thing. But yeah, it's quite a shift, because there are, over the years, I mean, the League has existed for quite some time now. There's been a ton of lore written up around all of these characters. So seeing it put out there, even if it is ultimately talking about, sister cities, a very tiny slice of, I believe, Runeterra.
Yeah, of what is out there in the actual Runeterra
the actual
universe.
World or whatever is a tiny slice of it. But they have an amazing space that they work within. And I used the word intimate not very long ago, but they tell a really emotional, impactful, again, intimate story within that confines.
And while they are exploring concepts that ultimately have an effect on the larger world, they're really centered on the character stories and the relationships between the characters. It's really, really fantastic.
Yeah.
And definitely one of the things that kind of go along with this show, because you see that it's animated, and if you're not into watching animated shows, like you only watch live action or whatever, this is not the normal type of animated show that you're used to watching. It's very adult themes, but not in adult themes of where it's raunchy or it's hyper violent and graphic.
It's got a little bit.
But the violent, when I say it's hyper violent,
it's fairly sanitized.
Yeah, there's not a lot of gore or anything like that. It's going to be relatively PG for what you're watching.
Yeah. It is definitively not a Saturday morning cartoon.
Yes.
It is definitely a different time slot that's more mature. That I don't know. Maybe I don't know what the old classic Toonami stuff.
10 p.m. beyond.
Yeah, there we go.
It really feels a lot like, I don't know, almost a Charles Dickens sort of story, like a story you would expect out of a Victorian author who is prone to,
and it has a lot of Victorian style themes.
Yeah.
Well, you have the shining beacon of progress, and you have kind of the cost of progress, which has been the
undercity
people within the slums who've been left behind. And in a lot of ways, the people within their ivory towers have forgotten them, right? I mean, they are so focused on the progress that they're forgetting the people who the progress was probably for.
Yeah. And it's very much a have and have nots.
Yeah. And there's even just outside of saying, oh, well, there's just kind of this broad theme. It really, really is the people. It is you have two sisters. It is, as Joel mentioned, a aspiring scientist and kind of an adopted brother. I think those are really the core interactions, because those moments within the show are just chef's kiss.
Yeah.
Just, so good.
Yeah.
So I think we have pretty well covered anything we can say without jumping into spoilers. So on that note, we are now heading into the intermission. If you don't want to get jinxed by spoilers, this is your stop. If you liked what you heard, we'd appreciate your support at patreon.com/spoilersintendedpodcast. And now, on with the show. All right, and welcome back, everyone. We are now past the intermission and deep into spoilers. Beware, dragons be here. So we are going to jump straight into our first of 4 categories, and the first piece that goes into our scoring is spectacle. Andrew, you want to give us a definition of spectacle? What are we looking for here?
So spectacle is the energy, the graphics, the action, everything that elicits emotion that isn't the score or the plot or the characters.
Everything is supposed to elicit emotion, but this is the spectacle part.
This is just how you feel the hype of the show.
Yeah, there we go.
And oh man, was it hype?
So go ahead, give us a score.
I gave it a 10.
Ooh, all right. We are off to I mean, it's a 9.5. All of these scores we're discussing all go into that. So spoilers, it's going to be a lot of big numbers.
It's going to be a lot. Like, I promise you, I tried to find things that I did not enjoy about this, especially when it comes to spectacle. I love animation. I love seeing different art designs and character designs and everything like that. And I just couldn't find anything. It was just perfect. Like, it was so good.
And they had a good feel of kind of not quite the Spiderverse feel, because Spiderverse was its own level of animation.
It's a whole different style, obviously, but it has a whole different league of animation.
But they did kind of pull some of what I felt like were the tricks of where it was definitely CGI.
Yeah.
But they went in and put in the lines on the faces and stuff, which really helped sell.
I mean,
emotion.
every frame looks like an oil painting.
Yeah.
And the thing too is they actually fused in a lot of 2D animation techniques, in particular with a lot of the smoke effects.
Oh yeah.
And some of the additional effects whenever Jinx was having her episodes, and there would be flashes of everything. Yeah. And a lot of that came down to very, very 2D style animation. Not differences. I
can't help you.
Sorry, I lost it. But the company that did all the production for this, Fortiche, it's a French company that does, and they've worked with Riot Games in the past to do a lot of their cinematics.
And all of their cinematics are
fantastic.
Where I alluded to it. They're all really good. They're already well on their way here for this.
This was just so far and above what we're used to seeing from them. Now, they've spent 6 years developing this show.
Right.
And clearly they, whenever I heard that they were coming out with a new, like a League of Legends show, I was like, well, okay, cool. They're finally doing it. Good for them.
Yeah.
And I had no expectations beyond like, oh, I'll watch it. I'll see some of my favorite champions just do some things and I'll enjoy it. This was just like, if you have not played League, if you're not familiar with League, you will still enjoy this show.
It is totally, your knowledge level is irrelevant because the three of us cover kind of the gamut of knowledge within the game.
Yeah, like you have way more knowledge than I do. I still have a pretty decent understanding of a lot of the champions. I played competitively for a while, and then Joel has none.
Well, I have only seen the hype videos that they put out on YouTube, right? Like, and those are really enjoyable to watch even without having played the game really at all.
Yeah. The one of the biggest things that I love whenever I talk about spectacle is the action sequences that you get, and a couple of the brawls that Vi gets in throughout the show are just so well choreographed. Like it feels like I'm watching a Creed film if you're familiar with the boxing films, and it just has such a frenetic and snappy feel whenever she's fighting, and like everything that she's doing makes sense, like in a physical form. It's not like, oh, she's a cartoon or she's in this weird universe. Like everything she's doing is very well based in what it would be if you were fighting like that.
Yeah.
And all the perspectives within the fight, you can keep track of who is who and where and what motion they are in.
Yep.
Which is pretty important and maybe sometimes kind of an underrated thing.
Yeah. Well, and you just don't get that kind of clarity in action scenes and just in general with how shows are made very often, just because like I think a lot of production companies kind of forget that they know everything.
Mhm.
So like they look at it from the perspective of, I know this person's here. That's fine. But does the audience know that person's there?
Yeah. Well, especially in like a rendering a 3D space, you know that I moved the camera and this object is now out of the camera.
Yep.
But if the audience never got to see that object, they have no idea. I mean, Andrew, it's not exactly the same thing, but when you are cutting on your artboard, there might be 600,000 objects on that artboard, and you're only cutting one thing.
Oh yeah,
and nobody else has to know that. Nobody else will know that, but you know it.
It's always fun whenever I send you guys like screenshots of my artboard, and like you see like everywhere. This little white block that has one thing in it, and then like everything on the gray around the artboard is just like there's just so much stuff.
So many lines. Yeah.
Anyways, okay, so I've talked about how much I love the spectacle of this show. Other people need to talk about how much they love the spectacle of this show.
Okay. Well, I utilized my immense willpower and self-restraint and also gave it a 10. I was blown away by the quality of not only the art, every still a painting, but also
just take a picture of it.
Yeah.
But also the motion. Like I really, really love when in animation you get to see organic movement, right? That really mimics the way that people move. Like it's not like hyper stylized. And this is a stylized art form, but at the same time, it really captures the essence of how the characters emote and like the way that their heads move, their facial tics, all of that kind of stuff really supports and bears out the emotions of the scene. Really, really love that. The fight scenes I wanted to tack on to not only are they choreographed really well, but the choices of camera position, for lack of a better term, is really puts you right inside the action at all times. And you have the opportunity with animation to give the audience a perspective that you just don't get with a real camera because you physically can't put it there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of those kind of shots that really set up, not only to make it an interesting shot visually, but really set up the emotion of the scene as well.
One of my favorite scenes was, I think, the second time, or maybe it's the first time that Vi and Savika fight in the bar, and she kind of like slams Savika onto the wall and then picks her up and body slams her down on the ground, and the camera follows the entire motion of going down on the ground.
That's the second fight. The first fight's in an alley, isn't it? Or am I misremembering?
The first fight is like she finds her.
She's playing cards.
Yeah, she was at not the main bar, but she was at a different bar, and then like they fought in there a little while, and then they ended the fight out in the alley.
That's where I'm getting across.
Vi was going to get more than likely killed, and then Caitlin saves her.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you're both looking at me, so I am also going to profess to be a man of deep and resoundingly strong will, and I also gave it a 10. I mean, animation's gorgeous. We've already been there. Relatively speaking, what is actually happening within the show is not super high. There's no world-ending threat, right?
No.
But they took their time to really focus on faces, emotions. In previous episodes, I'm reaching back to a certain episode about a show that used to be an anime and now it's live action, and then it wasn't live action anymore. They were a lot of just middle shots, and it's live action. There are limitations. Joel just talked about it. But man, they really know when to jump into a scene, and also, I'm going to flip off Joel's point here, also when to jump out of it. Because in the second fight, actually at the last drop for Vi and Savika, you have a lot of really close in, good fighting, boxing stuff going on, because it's basically just two brawlers going at it. And then they took a moment to just take the camera and put it outside on the sidewalk, across the street. And all you really see, and there's a little, little wind or something going on, but all you really see are just flashes of essentially their two impacts through the windows. That's it. And I thought that was actually really impressive, because one of the things that we did complain about for something like, say, live action Cowboy Bebop was the fights always felt slow because they didn't commit to jump cuts, which that's fine, but they also never took an opportunity like that to pull away from it and tell us what's happening without actually having to show us.
And give us the scale of kind of what is, what they're doing.
Yeah. So that particular scene, when that happened, that really, really struck me because it happens. You see it happen in shows and movies and stuff where they will do something like that. And sometimes it's just done for comedic effect, right? You pull out and there's just the two people out on the side and they're putting bets down on the fighter, whatever. But in that, because it was just a very quiet moment to pull out of this really brutal, close in, just a lot of hate and anger.
Mm-hmm.
But then they pull back and you get kind of a breather, but it's not really a breather because the action hasn't stopped. You're just not tucked right into it. So I thought that was really, really impressive. And it felt very, it's a weird thing to say. It felt very mature, like a very mature approach to handling everything. Because you can just, if you were always just blasting along at a 10, which I get used to it. That's what we're doing right now. It's a little desensitizing, right? When every power that hits you is a world-shattering power, what does the next power matter? Because it's the same scale.
Yeah.
When you pull back like that and you kind of shrink the scale down and you get the full quote-unquote perspective, it's just a bar fight between two people.
Mm-hmm.
It has its own type of impact, right?
But like to point back to, you talked about stakes, right? Stakes not necessarily being the highest, but really focusing on relationships. There are two ways in which you can make stakes do their job, right? Which is to engage the audience and make them care about the outcome of the struggle that's happening, the dramatic elements that are going on. And one of them is you can make the stakes high, right? Like they affect more people,
like
they have a more dramatic outcome, or you can make the stakes more personal.
Right.
And that's what this show did in spades, that all the stakes are deeply personal to all of the characters involved. Like their life and their hopes and their dreams are all wrapped up in this struggle that they're involved in.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I guess, where I was going with it. We're kind of pulled away from Marvel level stakes. We're not dropping a rock on the planet to destroy all life. We're really looking at the relationship of kind of a broken family of two sisters and the trials and tribulations of the two of them, and
ultimately their surrogate fathers who were sort of two brothers. So like it was kind of the history repeats itself.
Yeah, it was
generationally.
It was such a really neat kind of tiered flow with that kind of thing. Yeah.
There's so much. I mean, we'll get more into this with plot and other subjects and stuff, but the duality theme that they have for basically every single plot beat, visual, everything just kind of just cascades down from this. You have Piltover, you have the Undercity or / Zon.
Yeah.
And then everything just keeps going down, and it still has you have a counterpart to every single thing that shows up in the show. So you have the two scientists, you have Jason, you have Victor, which are both brilliant minds that consider each other brothers, but then they have two very different, essentially, goals towards the end of the show because, Victor, he's trying to just save his life, and, Jason's trying to do his best with the responsibility that he's kind of created himself.
Yeah, and you kind of see the outrunning of power, where he keeps ending up with more power that he didn't necessarily want, and it's kind of diverting him from his initial goal.
Yeah.
But even your scientist thing, I mean, you have Heimerdinger as well, right? And he's kind of operating on a different scale.
Yeah.
Because his species have such long lives that for him, we'll take a couple of decades and really perfect that. For Victor does not have that time.
He's got, weeks, months
tops.
Maybe.
Yeah. So the kind of, again, it's more duality of the scientists, of their two perspectives on what must be done for progress.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just all up and down, all around. We can go on and on about that kind of stuff.
So stray observation, whenever I'm watching shows with Holly, and especially if it's a show that has like a lot of really good quality animation, whenever we first started watching the first episode of Arcane, and they're kind of like jumping around on the roofs and everything, I was like, oh, this looks really good. This is pretty cool. And then whenever they get into Jace's apartment laboratory thing,
study or whatever,
and Powder picks up the unrefined arcane pebble or whatever, and she looks at it, and it has like the close-up shot of like all the reflections and stuff. I was like, oh, this is one of those shows where like every single frame is going to be beautiful.
Yeah,
got it.
They're going to be like, we can show off here, and we can show off there. And if you weren't looking that way, you should have been, because we were showing off over there too.
That kind of also, when Mel was one of the opening scenes, and I think one of the episodes where she's like doing a painting.
Yes.
You did not have to have her do any painting at all, and it would still be fine. But they're just like, well, why don't we just kind of flex here? And we're going to have her like going over the canvas with these like acrylic and oil paints, and like you can see the texture and the paints. Like, why did you do this?
Yeah.
Like,
they also had a lot of really good moments of dark and light, especially early on when Jace is brought before the council, and they like close the big doors. Like you have the feeling of his life is being closed off. He's being buried, and then you have the individual pools of light. They did a lot of play with that. There are a lot of really high contrast scenes where maybe half of a face is in light, half isn't. It's a very impressive understanding of
composition.
Just using a camera in a 3D space. It's literally a space that does not exist in real life.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just high. I'm obviously 10, 10, 10 high marks. All around. Moving forward into a category where we can ding them some. I'm just kidding. It's performance. So for performance, we are looking at casting choices. For animation, maybe it's a little bit more difficult, but maybe it's kind of how well do the voices and the actual animation match? How well do they blend together? And it can be hard sometimes to sell emotion for a voice actor. They don't have their face. They don't get their face. So how well do the animators and the voice actors match,
like sync up with each other? Because so sometimes you have where you can have a really emotional performance, but the animation just doesn't really do it. Or sometimes you have the really beautiful animation, but the performance doesn't really do it.
Yeah. So we're trying to look along those lines, and I'll kick us off on probably another round of 10s because I have a 10. And my wife, when we were watching it, said something along the lines of they really specialize in small child distress. Because the first 3 episodes. Yeah, I mean, I don't know who the voice actor was for Young Powder.
I can tell you.
Oh,
Mia Sinclair.
Okay, well, I don't know who she is. Obviously, when you go back into the olden times of crazy Hollywood stuff where they need the child actor to cry on stage, they just tell him they're going to take his puppy off set and shoot. Yeah. I don't know what they were doing to that poor girl, but they were doing something because, man, I mean, Powder is perpetually breaking down, but just the distress, just ooh.
In episode 3, whenever the group and Vi are like, we're going to go save Vander, you have to stay here. And then the cut of back to her where she is just totally losing it.
Just bawling.
And it's one of those things where I watch a lot of anime, and there's a lot of times where, characters die and people are sad, and I'm just like, oh, that's sad. But it never makes me feel uncomfortable. Watching her and just her facial expressions, and I'm like, ooh, man, this is like, I wasn't prepared for this.
Yeah, this is a little. We're ripping in a little deeper than I maybe wanted at the exact moment.
Yeah, it's man. Anyways,
and I mean, just throughout the whole thing, there are a lot of for the characters. There are a lot of highs and lows, and I feel like maybe some other things that we've reviewed in the past. We'll say, oh, the performance was good, but maybe the character didn't. The actor just didn't get much to work with. Nobody in this show has that excuse.
Yeah,
everyone had a moment for crazy emotional highs, crazy emotional lows, and they all nailed it.
Yeah,
and the animators obviously help with that. They push it through, but I really, it's easy to be impressed with voice actors when they do well, because it can be really difficult. You don't, actors act with their whole body, and that just what they are doing, even though they can push that through the microphone, they don't get the opportunity to connect that to the animation without really good animators at work. And just that whole thing, just oof. Yeah, so I'm going to throw this to, I don't know, Joel.
So I'm also going to give it a 10. Like this is just another 10 round.
We're just having such a struggle right now.
And I really want to highlight the performance for Silco.
Okay.
Who is Jason Spizak.
Yep.
Spizak.
Sure. Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
So
we tried.
But the combination of the voice acting and the animation, he is such a feral presence when he is attempting to intimidate the person that he's talking to.
And he intimidates.
He speaks menacingly with like controlled, like you realize that he's on the verge of being capable of doing violence, but he's completely controlled.
Yeah.
And
he knows exactly what he's going to do.
Yeah. And he moves in a predatory manner, and he speaks philosophically at you to the point where it makes you uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And then you juxtapose that with the scenes where he's talking to Jinx, and there's none of the predatory manner there. It is completely
a father-daughter.
Yeah, like he is being supportive and understanding and wanting the best for her. His sort of twisted vision of the best for her. And the only part where, because like you realize that this guy's a sociopath and he's just doing things for right, but like there's genuine connection there. And the only parts where he sort of does her wrong are where he's at risk of losing her. And so being able to bring that across and bring the villain of the piece such humanity was really, really impressive.
Well, and I'm going to jump in ahead of Andrew.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because you're talking about Silco. So I'm going to tack on. End of episode 3, right? The disaster has struck and Powder and Vi have been separated. And Powder is, again, small child in distress. And it's uncomfortable
watching.
And Silco goes through the exact same process that we are of, oh, am I hugging this? What do I'm okay, yes, this is what I'm doing. And there's no real acting. There's no vocalism really, I don't think. It's all animation, but it was such a great throughout the show they do such a great job of taking slow moments where the characters are moving deliberately.
Yeah.
And it's not that they're necessarily being deliberately predatory, although he has those moments, but it's just a very deliberate, and you can see the full range run through their faces.
And, and talking about gradual range transition in that scene where he, Powder throws herself at him, just clutching at anything around her that could be an anchor in her life that's falling apart. There's at the beginning of that, he is obviously using a tone of voice that he is intending not necessarily to harm her, but he's trying to control her.
Yeah, he has manipulation in mind.
Right. And his tone of voice changes throughout the scene until you get to the end of it to where he's like, okay, this is not what I expected.
Yeah.
And I accept you. I'm going to protect you.
Yeah, it kind of starts out with him being like an opportunity.
Yeah.
And then it becomes, is this a responsibility?
Yeah.
Anyways, Andrew.
Paragon of self. Yep. 10.
Yep.
Yeah, that's how it works, right? So we've kind of gone over the range of Silco. We've talked about just some of the overall just like animation quality of their facial expressions and how like emotive a lot of these characters have been. And it would be a disservice to not talk about Vi, who's arguably the main character of the show.
Yeah, it is actually pretty funny. We've all kind of danced around.
Yeah. And
like a boxer.
Oh, I was getting there. Yeah.
So you have Vi, like in the first 3 episodes, she definitely has a lot of range, but really she's just more of an angry kid.
She's a teenager.
Yeah. And then you get to the time skip, which is roughly 8 to 10 years ish. Somewhere around there. And whenever we finally get her out of the jail cell and she's kind of like walking around the Undercity and everything, you can just tell the despair and anger that she still has, because obviously, she's been locked up in this prison for something that, Marco was attempting to save her, but then clearly, like this has put a big toll on her character. And, you get so like all of her lines that she delivers for pretty much like the first, like those middle 3 episodes are just so gripping because she has nothing else. And she is only thing she cares about is trying to find Powder. And whenever she realizes that, basically Powder's not there anymore, now it's just a scramble of like, I have to save whatever is left of her. And she just,
and then Haley Steinfeld, right? Who, and I don't know what else she's been in, but I recognize the name.
She was
in things.
She was recently the female lead in Hawkeye.
That's where I know the name from. Okay, cool.
Like the live action?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, so she's the new Hawkeye.
She plays Kate Bishop in the show.
Okay. you already, it's in the preview. You know that she's going to be anyway. So she has such a range.
She also did the voice work for Spider-Gwen in Into the Spiderverse.
That is also where
I recognized her from. So, I mean, clearly a very talented individual.
So she has the
do we have to do Hawkeye now?
occasion to have been in our 2 highest rated subject matter media so far.
So we have to watch other things that have her in it to see if it is because she is in the show that elevates it up to such a level.
I've seen Hawkeye.
It
would break the trend. Anyway, moving on.
Woo!
Yeah, I mean, it was a 10 for performance. Like, it's just even all the extra characters. Like, Mel was a very cool and calculated character that she had just that kind of, like, not arrogance. It was there. It was arrogance,
it's a type of
but
arrogance,
it was like high society arrogance.
Oh yeah. She was even more so, and it may just be the way that they costumed her versus say like
because she's got like the gold and white.
Oh, and like the makeup, yeah. But versus say like who I can't even remember her name now, but Caitlin's mother, one of the other
Caitlin's
council
mom.
members, yeah, because she is also very obviously no hush. She is obviously also very much so part of the like aristocracy, but she
old
doesn't
money.
quite pull. Yeah. She that family oozes old money. But she doesn't quite pull it off in the same way that Mel does. It's a very different feel. And I don't know if it's necessarily a modernism or if it's that, it's Caitlin's mom and she has more of a maternal air.
I cannot pinpoint exactly what qualities they utilized in order to get this effect, but it feels like noblewoman versus daughter of an empress.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. It is.
Which I mean is what it is.
And we would be remiss about not talking about Mel's mom, who has like the presence of a freight train in a good way, where like she just dominates.
Built like a brick house.
I mean, like she just dominates every single scene that she was in. Even there's only a handful of them just because she came in later into the show. But whenever she was there, like she was the reason. Like just her. I mean,
like Vander, right? Same kind of drill. Played the type of character.
He's a big teddy bear.
Well, played the type of character of tough guy trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And getting caught up in the consequences
and just getting
of that.
beat up for it.
Yeah. And just up and down the scale. It's really hard to. It's honestly hard for me to find any point where I'd say, well, this is weak.
Yeah.
And I think they did a really good job of breaking the cast down. We've already talked about, right? Well, we have, the duality of this and the juxtaposition of that and all this. And the reason we get to talk about it is because they didn't just throw crowds and crowds of people at us. If there was a crowd, it was very much so in the background. And the story was always focused around 2s and 3s, at most 4 or 5 people. And that might be the total number of people who were recognizably in frame at once was maybe 4.
Well, and generally, if it was a large, like pretty much all the larger scenes that had a bunch of people in it were either faceless enforcers or the 4 kids.
Right.
And then after that, like as people unfortunately die, the cast gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Right. But even in moments where you have, like Victor is speaking to, not Victor, Jace is speaking to the crowd, Progress Day.
Yep.
The crowd is mostly faceless and in shadow, except for Mel
and Heimerdinger,
and like the critical main characters. They get picked out, but they do a really good job with that as well. Of even though this is a really big event, tons and tons of people, it still feels intimate. He is only speaking to Heimerdinger and Mel and his mother.
And I feel like something that played into that was every time Jace makes a decision, it's at the last possible moment. And so it is where he is facing this person on my left wants me to say this thing. This person on my right wants me to say this other thing. I have now reached the moment where I have to say a thing. And so now I'm going to decide. And so that kind of pulls those characters into the scene also.
Yeah. And I did not expect to like Victor as much as I did, just based off his initial introduction.
Yeah.
And then But man, they packed a lot into him.
Oh man, you feel so bad for him.
Oh gosh, do you ever? Yeah, there are multiple scenes where it's just oof.
Well, especially whenever, and this is more plot, but whenever he's kind of like fighting with the core, and then his assistant comes in, and then she tries to stop him, and you know exactly what's going to happen, and you just see in his face, he's just like he knows what's going to happen too, and it's just like. You just feel so bad for him.
Yeah, we're going to hit more on that in plot because there's again another thing that I talked about in Spectacle that they do really well there that other shows should take some notes on. Anyways, I think did we?
Yeah.
I mean 10, 10, 10.
10.
So let's go on to the score. So for this, we're talking music and its effects on the show. How well are we talking? How well are we? Pushing the emotion of the scene, carrying the emotion of the scene. How much does the music sell?
Does it
what you're feeling? Right? Does it detract? Does it enhance? Can you tell that it's there?
Yep.
Right. And I'm gonna kick this over to Andrew.
Oh man. Well, I'm sorry, guys. I had to just give it a 10.
Wow. We have not dipped off of 10.
No, it's just 10s. Just 10s.
I mean, clearly we do have some things that are going to knock it down because it is a 9.5, not a 10 or 100, I guess. So
same thing.
Same thing. The score, background music, original soundtrack, whatever you want to call it. So there's 4 actuals. So there's basically episodes 1 through 3 tracks, which are like the generic BGM music that just kind of punctuate every single scene that don't have like any vocals or anything like that. And those are uncredited, meaning that they were done in-house. And then so there's basically 3 albums for that. So there's episodes 1 through 3, 4 through 6, and 7 through 9. Then there is the title tracks, which are all of like the vocal ones, like Playground, which is probably like one of the most hyped songs I've heard in such a long time.
Yeah, kind of the pop,
like
hip hop type music that they have throughout.
Imagine Dragons' Enemy, which is like the title song,
right?
And just
I gotta throw it out here because Andrew at the start of the show, he's like, "Oh man, their title song is Imagine Dragons. I don't know how I feel about this."
So okay,
and at the end of it, it's a 10.
Yeah.
That's how he feels about it.
Well, so I am not an Imagine Dragons fan. And whenever we were watching the first episode and the title came, or the opening sequence came on, and we, because we watch it with subtitles on every once in a while, and it had Imagine Dragons on the subtitles, and me and Holly both actively groaned. We were just like, oh no. Because, we weren't sold on the show yet.
Yeah.
And, we listened to it and I was like, that wasn't that bad. And then, you watch the next episode and you're like, okay, that was fine. And then you watch the next episode and you're like, and you're kind of invested in the show.
Growing on me, yeah.
Well, the animation sequence for the opening was really, really good.
Oh, as well.
Great. It was probably the best opening of that style that I've seen since the Daredevil Netflix show.
We might have to start putting that into Spectacle, maybe talking about titles.
The Avengers, the first Avengers or second Avengers had, at the ending sequence, had them all like in like a marble kind of sculpture.
I think it was first.
I think it was the second one.
I don't know.
But anyways, so that was the last time I saw that done.
But anyway, watching the title sequence is a better experience listening to that song than listening to that song by itself, right? Like it's all one piece.
Yeah.
And all of the music for this show, whenever Vi and the group of kids are going down to the Undercity the first time and they're playing Playground, as they're walking through, she puts her hood up and she's kind of going through and bumping her way through the crowd. And
I think my favorite part about that particular sequence is how much the song choice reinforces the idea that she's finally free, she's coming home, but it isn't home anymore.
Yeah.
And so there's this feeling of just being unsettled.
The just every single track that they did, like especially with like the kind of music video style pieces where, like, at the beginning, I think of episode 7, where they do the rap song or the hip hop song for the firelights, where they're like spray painting everything, and it's very stylized, and it really puts you in the mentality of what you're kind of about to experience with them, because at this point in the story, they've captured Vi and Caitlin, and they're going back to their hideout essentially. So you get so much of a backstory with them without having to even have any exposition at all.
Yeah, you know what they are. They're the punk resistance.
Yeah, and like every single one of those main tracks just hit so hard for the scene that they're trying to basically reinforce. And it's kind of one of those things where it was a little ham-handed, but when the little mini music video for Imagine Dragons inside of the show, when they're walking through, it was kind of cheesy, but at the same time, you're like, that's kind of cool. Good for them. They're in a TV show.
I mean, you could have hit a 9 just for that one. You could have dropped off a little bit. That was a risk for them.
Yeah,
to do that.
But there is definitely one of those times where whenever I was watching it, the music brought me in, and it kept me there, and it held on whenever, if I got distracted by something on the side of the screen or something, it would just pull you right back in.
You're very conscious of the music choices throughout. Joel?
Well, I am going to take the first deviation on our little tour, and I'm gonna ding it a whole point for that mini music video with Imagine Dragons and give it a 9.
That's almost more of a plot issue. They could have just played the music and not shown the.
No, but I think this is also going to come in plot, but I think that their background being established through the mediums of a video game and music videos primarily, right? They are adapting that kind of experience to telling a episodic or a serialized story. And I think that it impacted obviously with a 9.5, we think that it came out
terrible,
good,
awful.
But there were in some ways, I feel like their background negatively affected how they worked on the show. And part of it was they leaned a little too heavily, in my opinion, into
the music video
ethos
when
they were doing
video. Yeah.
And it kind of, especially the part where you see Imagine Dragons animated in the show, it's like, okay, all right.
And like I said, it was a little ham-handed, but it's kind of one of those things where you're in the movie and then they say the title of the movie.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's the name of the movie.
Man, there's a very recent movie that came out that you're very high on that I will have to ding for that.
What movie?
Encanto. They didn't make it 4 minutes into that movie without telling me the title of the movie. And like, okay, come on, slow down.
I'm not super hot on the movie. It was good. I enjoyed it a lot.
It was good.
It was no Coco or Onward, but it was good.
Or Luca.
Anyways,
back to actual real stuff here.
Well, that's all I had to say. Like Andrew already took all of the really good points, and then he even took my bad point. And I was just like, well, okay.
And he gave your bad point a pass. And you're like, no.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to have to step in here and rectify Joel's wrongs with a 10.
He's bringing it up to like a 9.7.
Out of 6 scores so far, 1 has not been a 10.
So I'll give him props. There's a huge range of music. There is not just pop and hip hop in here. There's also some background music, but there's also some stuff that I struggle to place what it is. But it hits early on. The song title is Our Love.
Yeah, with Powder and Vander in the bar.
Right. So they've come back from the botch job, and
Vi didn't give herself up.
Vi's struggling with the idea of giving herself up. Powder is depressed because she caused the problem, and Vander is trying to patch everything. Right. So they're in. I mean, you brought your children to a bar because you own a bar, but you brought your children to a bar. They live in the bar. But you brought your children to a bar. But anyways, they're in a bar, and it's very much so home. This is their home. This is where the love is. This is where the people who hurt because you hurt are there. The people who want to fix it and make it better are there, right? So you time skip forward, and Vi comes back to the last drop, the bar, and that song hits. I don't think it's Misfit Toys.
No, it's When Everything Went Wrong.
When Everything, that's okay.
Well, you're talking with the with like the EDM song.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Not the brawl song at the end.
It's not the brawl.
Savika.
No, it's not the brawl.
That's When Everything Went.
Actually, I don't even think it's Vi. Maybe it's Savika that comes in, but you're reintroduced to the last drop, and everyone in there is, it's very much so doom 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 kind of music going, and everyone is hitting up shimmer drug. They're taking drugs. Yeah. It's a vastly different environment than what it was, and the music shift really sells it because there's not really a whole lot of dialogue in either of those scenes. And there are actually a lot of times when, in place of dialogue, they don't have to talk. You get expressions and small movements from the character that feel very real. They feel very alive. And behind it, you either have the lead tracks, the named songs, or you have some of that other music kind of helping to carry it along. And I think they do a really good job of kind of clearing space out, because it's been a complaint for us in the past with some movies that, hey, you didn't mix it well. I couldn't hear. Yeah. I could not hear Timothée Chalamet having a total come apart in a tent because you couldn't just tune it down just a little bit, guys. But the flip side here is they don't even try to have that fight. They just say, hey, this is the element we need to carry it, and we don't need anything else. And I think that's a really intelligent call. And maybe it doesn't fit within score, but it lets the score live and breathe and be its own creature. So very impressed.
Yeah, well, and this is just going to kind of segue into plot, but the show in general uses the show don't tell kind of mantra when it comes to storytelling and giving you character insight without just them saying, I'm mad, or I really wish you wouldn't do that. Like you can tell with their facial expressions, which comes into performance, or their actions, which is spectacle of what, like what they're feeling. And you don't, or even just like backstory, you don't have to say things.
Or what's said is just a handful of words. You don't need all of this going on to really drive it home. And they do a great job, and the music follows along that same line.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think Andrew is ready to push us right on into the plot.
Yep.
And we've only had 1 9, and this is a 9.5, so something's got to give, and I think this is where we have our little bit of give.
Plot is always the easiest one to knock because you can punch holes in things.
Picking some nits is real easy. Yeah. So I'm going to take this one first. I've been handing it away for y'all. So shame. I gave it an 8.
Okay.
So taking it down a couple notches from where we've been. And I think, positives, a lot of stuff feels earned. We see Vi and we see Kate really showcasing their abilities in fights. My nitpick there is Jace. I'm going to take that from both of y'all.
Stop taking it.
I want it. It's mine.
There's so few nits to pick.
There are, really, but there's mine. And he doesn't quite feel as earned for his fighting prowess.
No,
his technological prowess. Yeah, go for it.
Because like he's a student turned scientist turned politician, and now he can fight at superhuman levels just because he invented a hammer.
Right. Versus go ahead.
Yeah, no. Well, and that probably is more of the labor of you were adapting from a video game.
Right, yeah, like I was saying with music.
Jace is the champion. He needs to have his hammer. He needs to have an action scene.
Yeah, and so like that's kind of, we have this expectation of the background of knowing that he's a playable character in the game. We need to showcase that here at the expense of telling an internally consistent story.
Yeah, they missed an opportunity to have like a half a scene, right, where like Mel pays him a visit and he's already built the hammer and he's like test firing it, or he's shooting, and
or he's like working out, and you can tell he already has a lot of agility,
the reflexes,
right? Because
why are you messing with that?
The reason that Vi feels earned is because every downtime scene she is boxing, almost every single one,
she
right?
Grows up,
or she's beating someone.
She grows up super rough and tumble. I mean, the first episode doesn't even get over, and they're already in a street brawl.
So like you have to do that kind of thing, right? You have to not set it up once. You have to come back and touch it again and again and remind, hey, there are skills being acquired here, because skills take a long time to earn.
Right. And you do, but one touch is magnitudes worlds better than 0 touches.
Yeah,
and it's the most benefit for the most time efficient.
Yeah.
At least give me a scene.
Yeah, like if you like the scene whenever he's he's clearly forging the thing. He's got his shirt off. You have the fan service of like, ooh yeah, look at Jace. He's got the pecs ripped, and he's working in the smelting thing. If there was even just a little bit more in there of him like working out in a combat kind of practice,
because reflex agility drill thing,
then I could definitely understand a little bit more of him being able to go toe to toe and clearly being on top of these super soldiers that are on Shimmer.
Yeah.
Which Vi is totally believable whenever that happens. Because I'm like, man, you've been boxing for like 20 years.
She already has amazing reflexes, and then she's been enhanced at that point. So my final ding, and this is really probably my biggest ding, is first episode, we get it. We know everything points to the fact that Silco is going to be the bad guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
We knew it. We don't have to kill the cat to prove it.
Yep. I agree.
Like that might be a big pet peeve for me is the animal abuse in some shows to demonstrate that this person is evil. Oh, they take the animal, the trusting pet, and they do something. Don't do that. Just do it to a person or something else. Pick, and I know for some people that's not going to be nearly as big a deal, but that was nearly enough that I couldn't convince my wife to watch the show. Like that was pushing the level, and it was for us. Like you could see it coming, and I was like, oh gosh, they're going to do this, and I probably should have said something once I had, oh yeah, this is going to happen. But that is just that one thing where it's like there's so many other ways to say he's a bad guy.
He's a bad guy.
Yeah, and especially for someone who is not nearly as generic a bad guy as he ends up being,
because he's such a multifaceted character.
It was such a and we can play the juxtaposition game. Oh, look at how he mistreated the trusting pet versus how he tries to treat Jinx down the road. Yeah, we can play that game, but don't do that. That's just not worth it.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why I stopped watching Game of Thrones whenever it was first airing was the violence towards animals that they had. And I understand, it's all fake and whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But like, they kill one horse and I'm like, okay, you had whatever fun that
you got your shot in,
but then they kill another horse like 2 episodes later. And I was like, I'm done. I can't watch this.
Yeah.
Because it's needless and pointless, because you can show that like the Mountain is a really strong guy by doing anything else than just killing a horse.
Yeah, there are so many other options in this world to choose.
And whenever Silco, killed the cat, it was definitely one of those things where, I love my cats. Like I am an animal guy, and any kind of violence towards animals is pretty much like unacceptable for me. And you even warned me whenever, like you warned me that it was happening, and I was like, I have to watch it because I'm pretty sure we're going to review this. I'm going to watch it anyways. We watched it, and I was still mad. And we didn't watch the next episode for probably like 30 or 40 minutes because like we're both animal people. It really bothered me, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I knocked it a point for me,
jump in,
which was 9. And like, cause like right out the gate, like Steven said, there's so many other ways that you can show that Silco is a bad guy without just having him kill basically a trusting pet. And, from that perspective, that was pretty upsetting. But once you get over that, pretty much the only other thing was Jace, being able to go toe to toe with like Shimmer soldiers.
Such small things. And maybe I could say something about, as the plot pulled away from the really intimate connections, when we do get kind of the bigger, there could be global impacts of this decision.
Yeah.
Maybe it just doesn't feel as good because it just isn't the same tight view that you've had throughout.
Yeah.
But there's just only so many things to pick at. So you got to find something. So Joel?
I give it an 8.
Okay, so Joel found stuff to pick at too.
Yeah, I did.
This is where we all dinged it. So.
Yeah. So I mean, there was the issue with Jace's combat abilities not feeling earned, right? That was kind of universally recognized. Then for me, the development of turning the hex tech that we've been working on all this time into like specific weapons, right? I don't know. The again, this is because we're creating things that were originally created for a video game where like the background was not narratively important. Right. But these characters that are from the video games need to be seen wielding their iconic weapons, right? And so you have like the power fists for Vi, you have the hammer for Jace, that they are so stylized, and in the case of the power fists don't make a lot of sense from a physics perspective, because like you get this super strong hand, right? That even has like little jets in it and stuff to where you can punch really hard and like all that's great. But then the very first demonstration that he does is he picks up a boulder. But the thing is, like, if you have a really strong hand, you still can't pick up boulders because it's going to break your elbow. It's going to break your shoulder. It's going to throw your back out, right? And so like these kind of things without explanation just kind of pulled me out of the scene, where it's like, but that doesn't make any sense given what they've said about what this can do. And you can write in excuses, but they didn't.
Yeah.
So
small.
But what if the hands had like gyroscopes in them?
Gyroscopes do nothing. Anti-gravity devices do something.
But all they had to do was say that. They didn't say it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, and you know, this is magic, you know.
Right, but because it's being accessed through technology, it has very rigid rules.
Oh yeah, I don't disagree.
Yeah.
I just didn't knock it because I was just like, fine.
Yeah.
Also, I like Joel kind of displaying his non-knowledge of game, talking about iconic tools or weapons for these characters, right? Because Victor demos the laser arm.
Yeah.
That's his.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then obviously like Fishbones at the end whenever, which is the big rocket.
The rocket launcher.
Kind of thing that Jinx shoots. That's her ultimate.
Okay.
Then obviously, you know, she has her little chain gun and everything. And they didn't, well, I mean, you've probably seen the Echo.
Yeah, I've seen the Echo music video. So like when he has that cylinder that he carries the crystal in, I'm like, oh, okay, I see.
I know
and he's even got like the hourglass tattoo on his face, all in white. And I'm like, why do you have that?
Well, that's face paint, but
you have nothing to do with time travel at this point in your life. Why is that?
Why is that there? What are you doing?
But we can't talk about Echo without talking about just the fantastic action scene between him and Jinx.
Okay, so speaking on the good side, the really good side, this show does backstory in a condensed format better than anything I have ever seen. They take little snippets when they become relevant to the characters and their current motivations and attitudes, and just give you, this is something that happened to them before that completely changes your understanding of what's going on right now.
Yep.
And the battle sequence between Echo and Jinx does that in such a beautiful way, because it's like 20 seconds of showing how they used to play together. And when he drops the watch
and she
on his
knows.
hand, and at the start of the sequence you have no idea what the relevance of that is, and then it does a flashback of that was the signal for when they would start a game where he tries to reach her with a stick before she shoots him with a little like Nerf gun. But now they're actually doing it for real and they're trying to kill each other. But he is giving her this one last nod of, I still like, I'm about to, I have to stop you, but you're still, part of you is still my friend.
Yeah. This connection to the past between us.
Well, in her expression, the second that he drops the watch, and you can kind of see, because, you know, she's ready to fight.
Yeah.
And then she sees that and she's like, oh, this is what we're doing. And, you know, then she squares up to be able to shoot with, you know, like full readiness to shoot a pistol pretty much. And just the choreography of whenever, you know, he's going up and above and jumping around the bullets and everything. And then, you know, whenever he finally overcomes, you know, what he couldn't do whenever he was a kid. And he gets her, and, you know, they both like stare in each other's eyes, and you can tell that she's still still powder there. And she realizes that she's lost, and then just unapologetically just like, all right, here's the grenade.
Yeah. And also the
Game's
fact
over.
the fact that even when he wins, he can't finish it is foreshadowed by the fact that he gave her the nod at the beginning saying we're still friends. Then he gets to the end of it
and he's like, I'm here.
He can't go through it.
Yeah, you're still my friend. I can't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we all led this by being like, let me find little bits here to pluck out. But there are so many good things going on within the plot. It's almost easier to find the small things to pick at than it is to point to things and say, oh yeah, this was great, this was awesome. But one of those has got to be the last, not the final scene, but basically the final big set piece with Jinx at the table.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just basically a huge spilling out of all of her demons, all of the conflicts and all of the sources of the conflict. And that resolution and the way that plays through is just, oh gosh.
So I'll definitely say this. So because, like the first time watching it, whenever she kind of alludes to the fact that one, she has Caitlyn in custody, or, she kidnapped her. And then she also alludes that she killed her and decapitated her onto the
I know,
plate.
I was like, because like at this point in the show, you're like, yeah, she probably did that.
Yeah, and
I believe that there's a head in that.
Yeah, and I've very rarely been duped like that, where like you really think, because that she's capable of it.
Yeah.
And you really think that, oh man, they went real dark on this.
Mm-hmm.
And then, she does, and she's like, you didn't really think I did that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so mean.
Well, it's kind of the reverse fake stakes, right, that we get with some. I'm going to, reach into the Wayback Machine and talk about Star Wars and killing a Chewie. But it's the exact reverse play of it, right? You don't know what happened, and then they play the trick on you, versus you do know what happened, and they play a trick on you. And you're like, well, you took my disbelief that you've been carrying through this and just wrecked it. Whereas this,
you fear the worst.
Well, they lean into it. They're like, yeah, I know I got you hook, line, and sinker right there, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the interaction between Vi and Silco, once ever he gets his gag off, basically, and they're trying to fight for Powder and Jinx to, it's like, he is trying as desperately as he possibly can to not lose her.
Yeah.
And at this point, he's already, like, you already know, she doesn't know that, like, he is willing to give up everything for her. And not because he wants to manipulate her in any way. He loves her as a daughter.
Yeah, well, I mean, the only manipulation at this point is in the effort to not lose her.
Yeah.
Because like that is that abandonment and that feeling of being alone and unloved is what he got from his own like brother story
loss with Vander.
Vander, and is the thing that he fears most.
Right. And I didn't want to just run in and steal all the, gobble up all the good bits, but right, like we're prior to this point, you have Silco and Victor. Victor loses the will to fight. Like
Vander?
Victor.
Jace.
I'm never going to get that straight. I don't know why, but I cannot get that straight. Jace. So Silco and Jace.
So they meet on the battlements of the city.
Even before that, though, Jace has his moment of he's willing to fight, but he's not willing to pay the cost.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He's capable, but he's not actually mentally prepared for it.
Yeah.
So he negotiates the truce. And Silco gets everything they ever wanted. And he goes to the fountain with the statue of Vander. And
and I loved the shot of looking up at him as he's looking down at his drink to open that scene.
Yeah.
It's like, it'd be really, really hard to put a camera there, but you can animate from there.
You can animate from there, yeah. Well, and that's just, the animators show off a little like, yeah, you wish you could get that angle.
Yeah.
But it's such a great moment of, again, playing back into the kind of duality throughout of, well, he's at the point now where he really, really and truly understands Vander. I finally have within me everything we ever wanted. And I cannot pay the cost because the cost is the child. And now I finally understand what you went through when I put you into the situation that I did.
Yeah.
And how horrible that really was. And what kind of horrible choices had to be made in that process. And that's just, chef's kiss.
Can nothing be so undoing as a daughter?
But there's just so many more, and I will say, because you were talking about the Caitlyn, the possibility of did she decapitate her, right? There are so many moments, even going all the way back to episode 3, right, when Powder is going to have her moment of great success, which is actually a horrible moment, and they did such a good job of showing us everything, and kind of that moment of where you're being led to the cliff, and the cliff is there, and they are going to push you over it. And you don't want this horrible stuff to happen, but for the story to move forward, it's going to happen. And that happens multiple times in the episode, across episodes, where they just drag you right up and say, yep, that's what you're looking at, and that's where you're going.
Especially with that scene, too, because they even kind of bury the lead, news term. They bury it in, basically, you get like 2 other explosions of scenes of like what's happening until they finally show the explosion of what's happening inside of the room.
Right, because they like replay the same explosion over and over in order to get, because it's such everything happens in the span of 3 seconds for so many different characters. And it's life altering or life ending for so many different characters that they replay the same scene from different points of view like 5 times.
Life ending is life altering, just by definition.
It's an insufficient term.
One of the other things that I found so interesting with what they did is a lot of, I'll say, a lesser show or a lesser production company could have looked at the story that was written out, and they could have said, we don't need the first 3 episodes to be dedicated to just the younger characters. We could take those episodes and add more fluff or whatever you want to the more adult characters that everyone is familiar with,
right?
Which, like Jinx and Vi and Jace, and like that have all the League of Legends stuff that you're used to seeing. And then they're like, no, we want to spend 1/3 of our show to basically children, so you care about these kids.
We're gonna make you know what these relationships. We're not gonna just say, oh, this relationship is really important in a flashback. You're going to know this relationship.
Yeah, because you've been there.
Because like the 2 most important relationships, well, the 3 most important relationships in the show were the sibling relationships, Vi and Powder, Silco and Vander, and Jace and Victor.
Yeah.
And all of those, you just miss how important they are and how deep they are if you don't get those 3 episodes.
Right. And I mean, again, another, because now Victor's come up, another bit where something bad's happening, and Andrew already referenced it, but his assistant coming down the hall, and she's trying to work up her nerve or courage to talk to him as more than just a work thing. And it's like, oh no, honey, no, this is the ultimate bad timing.
Death flags all over the place.
This is so bad, don't, please. And then it happens, these are the kind of things that could very well be character ending, right? If there was an established relationship there, that maybe that just ends him as a character. He just ends his own life.
Well, I mean, he attempts to,
right?
And then he gets interrupted, like he interrupted Jace at the beginning.
Going back to the first 3
episodes.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, if you don't have that first episode, Jace interrupting him trying to do the same thing, it just has such a much less impact than what we did get, because now you have these 2 essentially surrogate brothers that they know what they're doing. Like they're they're not naive, and it's just such an important piece to be able to dedicate that kind of screen time and story time to it, because otherwise it just means nothing.
Yeah. Well, and the payoff ultimately just is so much larger, just because you can play. They're constantly ducking in and out of playing this game of 2 sides of a coin.
Yeah.
However you want to look at a duality juxtaposition play.
Yeah.
They do it over and over and over again, all across the board, and it just pays off over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And it just really, really good grip on a story, and just an understanding of how to play out and build out pieces throughout.
So we've pretty much hit a lot of plot stuff, but we're going to talk more about it as we kind of go into our faithful/originality score. Could be whatever, because I'm going to have the same score regardless. It wouldn't matter.
And it is?
And it is a 10, because...
Consistency.
Hey, I know what I like.
I like what I know.
And I like what I know. But I mean, it's just, man, just fantastic. What?
So
for Joel, everything's originality.
Everything's originality for me. And I gave it a 9. It was a lot of really well executed themes that were combined in unique ways. The only part that kind of felt done was the setting of the two cities, the two sister cities, felt very familiar. And so like, it's not really something that because we don't include this in the composite score, it's not really something that I would ding any particular category in our main rubric for, but it felt like not quite as original as it could possibly be, just because the city setting felt familiar.
Class warfare type, haves, have-nots, I
mean, that's pretty much just social commentary in general.
It's also kind of timeless social commentary.
You can go all the way back to Les Mis.
Same thing with Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
Like that's very much his kind of thing. Steven?
I gave it a 9.
Yeah.
And that's a combined, for me, that's a faithfulness and originality, because you want to see how the characters get their
weapons,
their powers, their things, their toys, whatever. How are they made? Because when you're introduced and Victor introduces himself, you're like, you are a long ways away from where you're going to end up. And there is a journey ahead of us that I am intrigued by, because up to this point, I've only been invested in who I thought were the main characters. And now I've been introduced to someone else who's obviously going to be a central figure. Heimerdinger was so good. Everything. I know
he's like one of your favorite characters.
I love Heimer. I like most of the Yordles.
Yeah.
Timo can die in a fire.
I love Timo.
Timo can die in a fire. If they give us some Corky and Tristana, I will be so satisfied.
No, give me Poppy.
Or pick. I don't care. Just any of those. Vigar.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Well, this is a terribly interesting conversation.
I'm sorry. Well, we were talking about faithfulness, dang it. And anyways, I will say there was some hesitation with Heimerdinger, because in trailers you see him and he doesn't have his goggles on, and he's a little terrifying without goggles. Like there's a little bit of, you look a little too much like a Yorkie that had a bad trim.
Yeah.
But it's still, I mean, it's exactly him, and him like going through this, like crossing the bridge and going through Streets of Zon and everything felt so much like just accurate to who he is as a character throughout everything. And just, he is ultimately at the end of it, he is at heart a scientist. I will go see the evidence. Just small bits and pieces like that just push through. And it's just such a great interweaving of new and old. Because up to this point, in game, you know that Jinx has a sister. She has a line about how crazy her sister is. And there was never a character that was denoted as her sister.
Yeah.
And there was always, lots of speculation and everything. But up to this point, there was never a confirmation from Riot. Oh, okay, she and Vi are related. Yeah. And then you hit this, and it's like, okay, cool. Well, now how are they've finally created the sandbox. How are they going to play in it? And oh gosh, they nailed it.
Well, and obviously they kind of foreshadow in the opening that obviously Vi and Jinx are going to be fighting against each other. They're not friends. They're clearly enemies at this point. So then you're trying to watch, okay, where's the breakdown of obviously whenever Powder, ends up killing her whole family, and, Vi is very mad, and, she hits her, and then she walks away, and then she immediately realizes that was a terrible, terrible choice. And then now but
the opportunity to make up for it and change it is taken away from her.
Yeah.
She attempts, she turns around and takes that first step, and then is caught.
And then Marco, takes her,
ruins everything, because Marco.
Yeah. And
the real villain of the story.
Well, then she spends the rest of the series trying to make that right. And unfortunately, by this point, it's been so long, and Jinx has, unfortunately had a poisoned mind kind of already, and then it's just gotten worse and worse and worse.
It's interesting because we do get a bit midway through where that's kind of put to the question, right? Because Jinx goes out as her grown up self with the flare that Vi gave her and said, when you need me, you light this and I will find you. And she's kept it for all these years. And now this is finally the moment of, my sister might still exist.
Yeah.
And I'm going to set up, this is my plea for help. I still am who I was.
And Echo messes it up.
Oh, well, of course, it's Echo. But just those moments like that are just so good, and they did such a good job of not getting in a rush, not tripping over themselves to just put all of it in front of you, to let it all just kind of play out and unfurl.
And that's one of the biggest things about this show is that they kept it a small enough scale to where any kind of like you said earlier, Joel, where you can either have really big stakes or really personal stakes.
Yeah.
And they did such a good job of making you so emotionally invested with every single character and like what happens and like because they've already established that characters can die in this series. Yeah. And whenever that happens, now you're kind of on the edge of your seat because you're like, I don't know who's safe anymore. Like, and if someone messes up, like Caitlyn could die and I don't want to see that, or even Vi could die. We don't know.
I mean, Victor is actively dying in front of us.
Well, going back, whenever I saw Victor, he's one of my favorite champions. Like I mained him for so long, and whenever he introduced himself as Victor, I'm like, oh, it's him, and you're not who I'm used to. I want to see this, and then got like halfway through the series, I'm like, I don't know if I don't want to know.
I don't actually want to know how we got there. Yeah.
Just man, the whole show is just fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, top marks all around. I'm really excited to see, season 1 ends on, I don't want to call it a cliffhanger, but kind of a suspended point.
It's definitely a cliffhanger.
I mean, I don't know that it is. I don't think that there's a choice in what happens.
I mean, because whenever we leave off, her missile is going through the window of the council, and Jace does not have his weapon on him.
He doesn't. But I think it's important that he just hit the point of, we are not going to manufacture weapons. We are going to broker peace. And now this missile's going to crash through, obviously from Zahn, and I assume kill
everyone.
I don't assume that it kills everyone.
I'm pretty sure Mel will die.
It can't, narratively speaking, it can't kill Victor because he has unfinished business with the core.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think it narratively could kill everyone else in the room, including Jace. And he's already had his moment with the hammer, so you've seen that.
Yeah.
So maybe it even does kill Jace.
See, I feel like Jace is safe. He's not safe. He's going to get hurt. But I think he's safe because he's going to be the driving force behind, I wanted peace. And then as soon as I actually was ready to reach out for peace, you gave me war, and my conviction is back. Yeah. And I'm ready to go to war now.
Well, especially if Mel dies.
Right. Yeah, that's the real, if Victor is badly injured and Mel dies, like that is the tipping point back for, I'm ready to face
We're going to
casualties.
War over
and he's prone to flip-flopping decisions already.
Yep.
Like they've shown that over and over again.
Yeah. And then the other two, Heimerdinger's not in the room. So the other two, I guess Vi's mom, I assume she's there.
She's there.
But if she dies, she dies, right?
Caitlyn's mom.
Good Lord, I'm struggling. He went along with me on that one too.
Yeah.
But the other council members are mostly irrelevant in terms of characters. They've already played their part. Heimerdinger's the only other character who could have been there who had a part still to play.
Well,
potentially.
and I'm interested to see him try and help the Firelights make tech and everything like that to make a better Undercity or Zahn than what Silco could possibly provide.
Yeah, or drugs. But,
yeah.
Science. But yeah, so I'm excited for season 2. It's a long ways. It's 2023, so it's really just a year away.
But apparently it's already under production.
And I do hope, because we have said, they put 6 years to get to this point, to get to season 1. I hope that not all of that was just season 1. And I assume that they put all that into building out a story and then breaking it down, because that helps, right? We've seen what happens when you have a long overarching story that isn't well managed.
Yeah.
So hopefully a lot of that time was well spent in building the story all the way out, so they have a plan and a roadmap in front of them.
Yeah. Well, so coming off of a 9.5 season 1, there is a lot of room to go down.
Yeah, and so a lot of that with the 6-year production time is creation of assets, that is storyboarding, that is art direction. There's a lot of that that's already in place.
Right.
So
just kind of as overhead.
Yeah, because hypothetically, a lot of those assets can be reused, or there's an infrastructure in place to whenever they create new assets, they don't have to make them completely from scratch. And like the algorithms and stuff to help do a lot of the shading and everything is already kind of built.
How they hit upon, this is what Zon lighting looks like.
Yeah.
That's still a thing that they can call back up,
exactly.
et cetera. Yeah.
So one would assume that because this has probably been in post-production for season 1 for at least 6 months to maybe a year. So you have to assume that once that kind of started wrapping, the original production team that made assets was already starting to work on season 2.
New stuff for season 2. And at that point, the story writers had already been on season 2 for a while because their job has been done.
Yeah. So, hypothetically, like you could just have, another, just major masterpiece hit. But like Joel said, there's a long way to go down if you can't stick the landing and if this was just a fluke.
Yeah, right. It's the same problem that we're looking at with Spiderverse 2 or 2.1 or however they're doing it.
It's 2.1.
Spiderverse 2 Part 1. Don't do that. Just tell me it's Spiderverse 2 and then tell me you have Spiderverse 3 coming.
Yeah.
But it's same issue, right? We rated that very highly. It's well thought of. There's a lot of room for a downslide. So there's always a fear. Hopefully the teams for both productions are in place because I would love to see both of these things, hit a part 2 and just nail it. So, but that sounds like all the time we've got for this episode. So until next time, I'm Steven.
I'm Andrew.
And I'm Joel.
And every spoiler was intended. Thank you for tuning in. If you like what you heard, you can support the show for as low as $1 at patreon.com/spoilersintendedpodcast. We also have a Discord server and would love to have more people joining in the conversation. Links are in the description below. Thank you.